Welcome to episode 240 of Control the Controllables. And we have another special guest for you today in Candy Reid. Now, some of you might not know Candy, but you will recognise her voice if you are someone that watches tennis, because she is always commentating on WTA matches, ATP matches. She brings brilliant articulation on the court. She has that in abundance from the experience that she has had over her career, from being a tennis player herself, a Division I tennis player at the University of Tennessee, and then working for CNN for so many years, where she interviewed the likes of Tiger Woods, Serena Williams, Roger Federer. You know, these are the people that she has been around. And we get into all of those stories and so much more. I promise you're going to love this one again. Here is Candy. So Candy Reid, a big welcome to Control the Controllables. How you doing?
I'm well, Dan. I think it's been a few years I've been waiting for this big moment, and now it has finally arrived.
Absolutely. And for me, actually, Candy, it's like, I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, of all the females in the world, I think I hear your voice more than maybe not my wife. But whenever I turn on the TV, the social media, I'm now picking it out, all the social media little links.
Sorry about that.
And your voice flying around. So, and now here you are on Control the Controllables. So it's a big treat to have you. A big
Pleasure. It's all mine.
Welcome. And as you know, because I know you've listened to the other 237 episodes, Candy.
Every single one.
Is the starting point, I guess, is, and we've got lots to go into, because I'm looking forward to hearing your story a bit more, actually, because there'll be parts that I won't know for sure, but I like to start where it starts, because
it's a good place to start.
3 or 4 weeks ago, we're in China. You're walking around carrying a big camera, with the cameraman not carrying out anything, which we might have to get into why that was the case as well. In some quite kind of lonely places, doing this kind of weird and wonderful thing that the sport of tennis has brought to us. The passion does start somewhere, and that's the bit for me that I want to know. When did tennis get into your blood? What was take you back? I know you've got a couple of years on me, so all of those years back, How did it begin?
Well, I was 8 and I went to quite an academic school and started playing short tennis in the sports hall.
Yep.
And I was quite good at it, apparently. I think about 4 months later, I think I was playing the under-8 short tennis nationals.
Telford.
In Telford. And I remember losing, and this will be a familiar name to you, I remember losing to Zoe Mellis, who's since become a good friend of mine. And so we've been playing each other since we were under 8. And
Wow.
just a few months after I started, I can reveal, though, that my grandmother on my mother's side played at Junior Wimbledon. So she was a very good player. She also swam for Australia, which is a weird one. My mother was a professional ballet dancer, went to the Royal Ballet School in London. My father was and would have been a professional cricketer, but in his day there wasn't really much money in it. So he was a stockbroker and played county cricket at a very high level, was very good friends with the Stewart family. So I've sort of got sporting background, but no real tennis background from my parents, but it just turned out that I was quite good at it. And one thing went to another, and I played in all the teams of all the sports. I'm sure you did as well. So field hockey, netball, I swam, I pretty much did everything, basketball, you name it, I did it. But that was just the one that kind of stuck out, and I just kept doing it.
And did the ballet translate into the footwork on the court, Candy?
The ballet was appalling, absolutely appalling. I'm quite tall, so I never quite got to 5'11", but I always had really big feet, which is a problem in England. I actually lived in America, I'm sure we'll talk about that, for 22 years, where it's easy to get big shoes.
Yeah.
So my American size is 11, and my British size is 9.5, where you cannot get shoes at 9.5.
Right,
it's
okay.
impossible. So you can imagine this kind of, I was very pale, which I still am. I was very tall. I was very slim, and I had these enormous feet. So ballet and I didn't really go very well together.
And to take you back to the short tennis, because I played those finals, and it was quite a big deal, wasn't it, at the time?
Big
It
deal.
was like, what is like happening here? There's all sorts, and in my era, my year, the winner. I want to say he was the winner or he was the runner-up. I think he was the winner, but he's a guy called James Foster.
I remember James
Now
Foster.
James Foster had the let's say he was John McEnroe on steroids at age 8. I
Wow.
mean, we'll talk about drama and tears and rackets flying, and I remember they actually did an article on him the day after in the Daily Telegraph or the Sunday Telegraph that is this the next John McEnroe? Well, James Foster went on to play for England cricket team
Yeah.
and Essex, and obviously had a very successful cricket career, and I guess it's that sort of old adage a little bit as coaches. We often say the ones that are good when they're young don't end up being good when they're older, and so it's quite interesting that, and I wonder how many of those names from that under eights, because there was certainly a few in mind, but I wonder how many of them, like yourself, like Zoe, went on to have a solid, strong career in tennis as well. Do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't, but most of the players that I played with are still playing now. So I play a bit for the Great Britain over now 45 team,
Yep.
and I've been playing for Britain's from over 35. So they call it the Masters now. It used to be the seniors, but quite a few people that I played with as a under 8, under 10 player are now continuing to play that. I think most of the players that sort of played at the top of the country for my age and around that did something in
Yep.
professional tennis. I cannot confess to at all having a strong professional career. I would do many, many things differently if I could, but too late. And sort of things went the broadcasting route in the end. I know you played a lot and professionally as well, but yeah, it's a strange one. I think I never really loved playing tennis. I know that's a strange thing to say. When I was a junior, I loved playing doubles.
Yep.
And actually, if I could do my career again, I would just play doubles because I was
Would you?
much more mindset with that. And of course, you're in that field now with Gabby and Erin. I absolutely love doubles, and that was my skill set because my volleys still, I would say, and I'm blowing my own trumpet here, are world class. My technique on my volleys is world class. The rest of my game is absolutely terrible. So if I can get to the net, I can beat anybody. But of course, you've got to get to the net. So, it's not that easy. But I made just so many mistakes. And I think having parents that actually weren't in the tennis world, that hurt a lot because we made a lot of mistakes with coaches, with training, with strength. I was injured a lot. I was talking about how tall
Okay.
and thin I was. I was never really very healthy. I had a bad attitude, talking about James Foster. I used to throw my racket as well until about 12. And there were quite a lot of tears as well. I had a younger brother who played a bit, and he used to cry when he was winning. I cried when I was losing.
Right, okay. Because the balance is interesting what you say about parents. So I would argue my parents weren't involved enough. That's a really, yeah, we're always saying parents shouldn't be involved.
You've got to
Yeah,
have one parent that's involved, though, don't you? I mean, you cannot get away with it. I think it's so naive to say, "Oh, your parents should stay, off the court, not be involved," because they're the ones paying the bills. They're the
got to be
ones
a
ferrying
driving
you around.
force. Yeah,
Exactly. And if you said, Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are a few exceptions, but if you said to most 10-year-olds, well, you've got a tournament tomorrow and you've got a sleepover tonight. So you can not play particularly well at the tournament and go to the sleepover, or you don't go to the sleepover and you've got a good chance of winning. Most of the players, if they're, say, 10, 12, they're going to choose the sleepover if they're not guided. And obviously that's the wrong decision. But you've got to have a parent that actually puts the sledgehammer down and says, no, we're putting a lot of money, we're putting a lot of time, you've got to work harder, your attitude wasn't good enough. So you've got to have that guiding light, but then again, you've got to have the parent that sort of understands sport. And sometimes when you play well, you're going to lose. Sometimes you're going to walk on court and not be feeling great and you're going to lose. So there's lots of ups and downs in tennis, aren't there? It's a real
yeah.
marathon.
But I would say times are changing slightly on that. I think that it's unbelievable how many mini professional tennis players they are now at kind of 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
social media is. We live in the world of comparison, the world of instant gratification, the world of, if they're doing something, we need to do it. Everything needs to be done now and now. So I think that's my first point on that, Candy. But then my second point on that is like, is it healthy that the parents not letting the kid have that sleepover when we're talking about longer term sustainable success in the sport? Because the best interview that's happened, in my opinion, in 2024, and I love listening to interviews. Like I think you learn a lot. Like
I do too.
Like mindset, where they're at. There's massive insights that come out subtly often. Now, he's had his own story in 2024, which I don't necessarily want to jump into today, but Yannick Sinner, when he won the Australian Open, he told us all, and I think he did it in a very genuine way, thank you for my parents for just letting me basically be who I am.
Yeah.
And allowing me, just supporting me to do what I do. Yannick Sinner has also got a very special story in the fact that he was a skier. He genuinely played ITF juniors, and I think he's the first world number one male player. And you might know this better than me, Candy. His first male world number one in a long time who played juniors and wasn't a junior Grand Slam winner or right at the very top of the game. I know like Rafa didn't play juniors and there's players that didn't. He genuinely played, because I used to see him and he was okay, but he was 150 in the world juniors, which is a very good level, but it isn't go on and win multiple Grand Slams level in terms of what we've and he was probably the first person in many a year that's told us it's all right if your parents are just normal and let you be normal and make your own choices. And what I loved about that is I think we've been fed this message that you need to have, quote unquote, a crazy parent. You need to have someone who's sending, doing it that way. And I just am not sure that that's the healthiest outlook for our sport in a world that is already struggling with mental health going up and rising. The more and more stresses on kids with social media, with comparisons, with online bullying, with, all of these different things that the world, there's more neurodivergent kids now, and it's going up and up because of the way that we're living life. I just thought that was a really nice message to take from 2024. Hey, you can be good at tennis and still be somewhat normal. But
I'd
maybe
love
I'm
to know
living
the
in a dream
background,
world.
though, wouldn't you, Dan? Because obviously, someone has to pay for tennis, and we know it's very expensive. Someone has to do the driving, and we know that's very
Yeah.
time-consuming. So there must have been someone, whether it was mum or dad, grandparent, that was doing that. And I agree with you. Obviously, you don't want a crazy parent. You want a well-adjusted child who's doing it because they love tennis.
Yeah.
But you also need a parent that's going to make sure that your child isn't wasting their time, wasting
Yeah.
everybody else's time. It is a massive investment, and the whole family have to really be in it. When I played, my brothers gave up a lot of time with my mum because my mum was doing the majority of the driving. And I remember playing basketball as well. And my dad saying, you've got to pick something because you're away every weekend. And my two brothers suffered. My dad probably suffered. We had animals at home. So someone's got to make the commitment to do all the hard work. But maybe Sinner had, courts on his doorstep. Maybe he was able to walk there. Maybe there were tournaments locally that, no one had to ferry him to. I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, I agree. I thought that was very reassuring. And also the fact that he wasn't a top junior. And because I tell the kids that I work with still, which I work with a few youngsters, that, it is a long-term thing. Have that attitude where you're building towards something. And just quickly, I remember Jack Draper saying a story about Yannick Sinner. I think he played him in doubles growing up. And he said we actually hit to Sinner because he was the weaker one of the two Italians we played because he wasn't that great. And it is a nice reassuring story, that.
To us mere mortals, it certainly is. It's like there's still a chance for us. If we...
I don't think so, Dan. I think I'm out. You can go for it.
But was that, if we go back to you though, in that period, did you want to be a professional tennis player?
Yes.
You did. So you were training, you were doing the thing you wanted to be. So why weren't you?
I had no idea how hard it was. I mean, I was talking about, winning Wimbledon 5 times and, absolutely outrageous things, because I think you've got a little bit of a small mind. I was naturally quite talented and sporty, so I got
Yep.
away with it. But I don't know about you. You were, as you said, a few years younger. I wasn't doing the work in the gym. I was playing a little bit, but as I said, I went to a very academic school. So I was there from, say, 8 to 5:30, because I was playing in all the school teams. So I had sport every afternoon. Then I was maybe taking the bus, or my mum was taking me to practice. I was practicing an hour. I was coming back. I had 2, 3 hours of homework. And then I tried to get, 8 hours sleep and do it all again the next day. So I remember listening to a Hall of Fame advert which featured Martina Hingis in America. And she was saying, how many hours she was playing at the age of 13. And I thought, I was playing about, 1/20th of what she was doing.
Yeah.
So really, realistically, I had absolutely no chance. I just wasn't putting enough hours in.
But knowing what you know now, which is a lot, you've been through the
Some would
sport
question that.
in many different facets of the sport. And this is a little bit of more, there's more complexity to this question than just a straight up question, I guess, because you also know the sacrifice and the compromise that it takes. So you said earlier there's loads of things you would do different, but if you did those things different, the sacrifice and compromise would have come somewhere else in your life, well educated, apart from that bloody University of Tennessee, but we'll talk about that in a bit, and then you've gone on and had a very good career in another side of the game and in broadcasting. And so knowing what you know now on both sides, there would need to be sacrifice and compromise somewhere.
Yeah.
Would you do it different? Would you, and if you did, how would you do that different? Where would you put the compromise and the sacrifice? And would you have gone and tried to push the professional playing journey more? Which I guess leads into, maybe, do you have any regrets within not becoming a top professional tennis player?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I listen to a lot of podcasts like you. I love to learn. I hope I have a growth mindset. And a lot of people say, you can't have regrets. But I think it's inevitable that you do. And of course I do, about my tennis career, because I think I could have been a lot better than I was. I think I left a lot out on the table. And I would do it differently. And of course, my life has turned out really well. I think, the best life in the world. There's not a day goes by where I don't have a huge smile on my face. So everything worked out really well, whether it would have if I put a bit more effort into the tennis. But I think I would have concentrated on my technique a lot more when I was younger. As I said, my volleys were good and I had a good serve, but I had massive shoulder problems. So I wasn't really doing much work in the gym. I would have really got a lot stronger, a lot fitter, a lot faster. I probably would have put more time in with better coaches, with better practice partners. I would have made better decisions as to where to train. Just little things like that I was kind of going along, and people would tell me, bits and bobs. I'll tell you a crazy story that I still have a regret about. This was before under 18 nationals. I think I was 16, maybe 17, but it was quite a big time. I was working with Ian Hughes, the coach who's gone on to coach the likes of Belinda Bencic, Katerina Siniakova, Alina Svitolina, and now Magda Linette. So top coach, but he'd just come out of football. So this was one of his first sort of coaching assignments in tennis. And I was doing really well under him. I'd got back to, I think, number 3 in the country after being out for a good year and a half with a shoulder problem. And I went to a training camp in Germany. And it was, I won't tell you who the names were, but I've actually spoken to one of them. It was Jose Higueras. I will tell you one of them. He wasn't there. He doesn't remember anything about this training camp in Germany, but it had his name to it. And another big name coach who was coaching Arantxa Sanchez Vicario. And this coach suggested that I had a grip change on my forehand. This was 2-3 weeks before under 18 nationals in Britain. And he said, you should go to a Pete Sampras forehand. And I did. Because I thought, well, this guy has coached a major champion.
Yep.
And he's just told me that I should change my grip and have a Pete Sampras forehand. So I'm going to do it. I mean, isn't that the craziest thing ever? Absolutely mad. But I went along with it because I was sort of used to authority, suggesting something. And I thought,
Absolutely.
well, they know a lot more than me. So I did it. And of course, I had terrible wrist problems.
How
because
many
I'm trying to hit
balls
this.
did you lose?
Oh, so many balls. I mean, I think I lost my mind, let alone the tennis balls. I think more went in the bottom of the net than out of the court. So I came back and played under 18 nationals, lost first round, of course. Ian Hughes, as you can imagine, was absolutely apoplectic with me. We've since resolved that, but I mean, it's just
Yeah.
stupid things like that I don't know. I mean, obviously it was my fault because I was old enough to know better, but
Yeah,
just
but
one of those things.
you wouldn't be the first or the last in that time period. I think that's how it was, right? And I mean, we certainly get it when people come to the Soto Tennis Academy because people are. And what we now do is we make sure every player that comes, there's WhatsApp groups set up, and in that WhatsApp group, the coach is also set up in the group, because I think there is this anxiety and natural kind of fear that coaches have because these stories used to happen. I would
Mm.
have a similar one when I went to Seguso Bassett in Florida for a month, and it was actually
I
before the
went
under
there.
14 nationals.
Yeah.
And again, I remember coming back and I was all over the place. The technical changes that had been made, and it
Oh,
wasn't their place, right, to do, and just like mine, like when people come to our academy, it's not our place to make technical changes.
no.
It's to add value in lots of different ways, but also to converse and have open communications with the coach back at home. And it might be that the technical change I would recommend is better than what it is. However, there's a process that's going on. So the sport, even though I think the sport's a little bit in the dinosaur ages in some ways, I think that stuff certainly evolved, I believe,
Mm.
and I think probably for the best, right? Because there'll be players and what used to happen, I remember again, I used to remember players, they'd go to Spain for a couple of weeks and play on the clay, and then they'd come back and play like the British tours or some, and I was like, I used to watch that player serve and volley three points a game. They're literally on the back fence. The grip's around here somewhere, and they believe, and that was almost a belief. That's not that long ago. You play on a clay court. I've got to go way back. I've got to put my grip around. I've
Yeah.
got to grunt a bit louder. I've got to do all of these things, and it's like maybe we are getting a bit more sophisticated and we're moving with the times. But there was some crazy, crazy moments, and. Moving you kind of forward a little bit, Candy, if we talk about, you want to, I want to ask you this question because I certainly, I ended up on a very similar to pathway to you, right? Because I ended up going to a very similar level university, one of the better universities in Division One, same conference. I joked about it before, but they were my arch enemies when I was
Yeah.
in college, University of Tennessee.
Yeah.
But when I went on this amazing scholarship to this amazing university in America, to have 4.5 years of incredible resource thrown at me, to have the experience of a lifetime, to get a degree, to meet friends for life, to do all of these things, I felt I was a failure by going. That
Yes.
was that kind of. So if you go back to that period, were you failing by going to US college at that time? Is that your memory of it? Or were you excited that you had the opportunity to go to US college?
I think I was excited because I knew enough people who had been and had a great time. So I took a year off after A levels, and I was in Uzbekistan in Tashkent actually, and I started watching CNN on the television because there was nothing else in English, and that's when I decided actually I wasn't going to be a tennis player. I wanted to be a broadcaster. So
Wow.
that's how it worked. I decided I was going to be the next Christian Armenpour. So I wanted to be in the middle of a war zone, um, making interesting live shots. As we know, it didn't quite happen like that. But so that was kind of a turning point for me, that I thought tennis wasn't going to be my future. And I also knew in the back of my mind that I wasn't going to be good enough. And I felt like I didn't really want to be that journey woman, the player playing sort of around 300 to 500, maybe, a little better, probably in doubles I would have been better, but just scratching a living and living out of a suitcase in some strange places. So I think I was quite excited to go to university. I went to Australia as well for a month during my year off, and a lot of the Australian girls were also going to US college, and for them it was a really big deal. And some of them were at the top of the game in Australia. So no, it was a good decision. I picked University of Tennessee, firstly because the coach came and saw me, and he seemed nice. And the second, it was 3 hours from Atlanta and CNN. So I knew that I could get down there quickly. So it was quite sort of worked out well where I went and why I went. And I'd like to know actually why you went to LSU.
I'm going to tell you that in a minute. Don't you do this broadcast thing on me and switch, this whole switchy thing. I just had a big smile on my face when you told that story because as I was I don't prepare a whole lot of kind of script for these conversations, as you can probably tell. But the one thing that I did just look at and I jotted down was kind of segueing into CNN, which we'll definitely get to in a minute, was I wrote, and I'll say what I wrote. I said, I remember turning on the TV in some far and away place, as CNN is often the only English-speaking channel, and there was Candy Reid. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, how amazing is she doing? Like, I haven't heard or seen you for years, and there you are. I'd love to remember which might have been Uzbekistan. But even to this day, like in China, that one English channel was CNN. It's like that. It's that one channel that you're away from home. That, I mean, I don't know how many times I want to hear about Donald bloody Trump, but it's like, but that is the one channel that you get. So we're gonna come back to that, but I will answer your question. My story to US college, genuinely, I was a failure. That's how it felt, and because I was, which is madness, looking
It really
back,
is.
because actually, and I've talked about this quite a bit, and I've done this. I've done a few presentations on this. I was lucky that I was just not good enough.
You were kind of on the cusp.
At quite a few stages of my tennis when I reflect, and I was just not good enough to then for people to tell me to go and play a professional at that age. I was just not good enough in certain instances. Even when I stopped playing, felt I was just maybe not good enough to keep trying to live the dream, and I knew the right time to get out. And I almost feel quite lucky on that now. But if I go back, it was a tough time because it was like, I don't need any violins, but I went to play a Grade 2 ITF tournament in New Orleans, the Sugar Bowl. And at that time, I mean, it's probably swamped with US college coaches now. It wasn't, but I did happen to speak to a couple of people, and Ian Barclay was my coach at the time. And when we got back, Ian said, Dan, I'd like to chat to you because I actually think this could be a really good thing for you. College coach has spoken to me from Louisiana State University, and they would love to offer you a scholarship. And I feel at your stage, this could be a great thing, really a good thing. And I thank him a lot for that now, and Ian's still a special person in my life. But at the time, all I heard was, Dan, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And because everyone else that I was with, the Martin Lees, the James Trotmans, the Simon Dixons, the David Sherwoods, they all that was in my head is, well, why are they not going? They're off playing professional tennis. And that was very much and then what I had to do, I'd said goodbye. I was supposed to go in the January of 98. And living at Bisham Abbey, as amazing as Bisham Abbey was, it could be quite a lonely, dark place, certainly in the winter months. And I've got this like quite strong image of me, and it was like December, let's say December the 1st, and there was another 2 or 3 weeks left of the term. And I was going to US college in January, or so I thought, and they were all going off to Orange Bowl. So as the bus is leaving to take them, and we were all a really tight-knit group, we're all in tears because they're saying goodbye to me because I'm going off to America in January, but I'm about to do 3 weeks at Bisham on my own completely, whilst they're all going to play some of the biggest junior tournaments in the world, and I'm like waving them off and kind of playing the James Blunt song "Goodbye My Lover" in my head right now. And it was this
Something you need to tell us here, Dan.
it was just this heartbreak of like, I'm shit.
Yeah.
They're off to play these amazing events. I'm clearly not good enough. And there was a couple of little things that I like overheard conversations, and I guess these are good things for coaches to hear as well. Like I overheard a conversation about me. I was going to go to Kuwait to play some ITF grade fives, and I overheard the coaches speaking. They said, "No, what we'll do is we'll send Dan to play doubles with James Nelson, who's a couple of years older, because Dan will be able to really show James how to play doubles, and they'll probably win the events, and then it gets James's ranking up." So like I had a few things that were kind of happening, and the impact of that was huge, really. Now, the funny part about that story is the clearinghouse in America on about December the 28th went, sorry, you haven't done a GCSE you needed to do. Like I hadn't taken a science, or I had whatever it was.
Yeah.
So you actually have to go back to school if you want to go, and you can then start in August of the next year. So when everyone came back in January, rewind to Goodbye My Lover moment as they went off into the sunset off to Florida, and they were like, Dan, because we didn't have mobile phones. So we weren't communicating. And they were like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm back. I'm like, but I'm not only back, I'm about to be 18 years old, and I'm going to school with Lee Charles and James Nelson, 2 years behind.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't online, to do a GCSE. So I had to do my science GCSE in a 4 or 5 month period from scratch. And then once I then got the grade for that, I then went out in August. And the final part of that story is by September the 10th, I felt I was the best player in the world, and it was the best decision I'd ever made.
Great.
It took 3 weeks. And
love that.
And it took 3 weeks for me to think, and I had a conscious thought, oh my God, you're good at tennis.
Oh, that's so great.
And I hadn't thought that for 2 or 3 years.
Were you told when you were a junior, when I started playing 10,000s and then 25,000s, we were told as females, because of course there were so many good players who were younger. The year I played junior Wimbledon, I think it was 17, and Martina Hingis was 13, and she won it. And we were told that if you don't get out of 10,000s within 3 months, you're not going to be good enough. You're not going to make it. And that was pretty much universal. So, you're in there for longer than 3 months. You think, well, I've got no chance. Was it the same with the boys?
Yeah, it was very similar in that regard of like, there was a lot of absolutisms that fly around, and like, it's become a big part of my philosophies as well now, that like, we role model completely wrong in our sport.
Yeah.
Like, I love Carlos Alcaraz, but he's a role model in a certain way. But he isn't a role model in terms of the journey to repeat.
It's completely unrealistic, like a Holger Rune as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
They're the rare air. They're not the norm.
Absolutely. Generational talents that, it's not the way. And I think we were very naive back in that period, or the people that were advising were very naive to those points, and we weren't educated enough on the different stories. And that's what I love about this podcast, or other podcasts like Dominic Kopfer, played tennis twice a week up until 16.
Yeah.
Went to Tulane University, wasn't even in the lineup in the first year. Like, earned his stripes, and then has made it up to 30, 40 in the world.
Yeah. He's so good.
Career. Yeah. Like, so what I would say for me, and again, I would tell a story is, and I won't name names, but it was the head of men's tennis at the time when I came out of college. When I came out of college, I played 4 futures in America, and I qualified at I played 3. I qualified in all 3. And in all 3, I lost to an ATP ranked top 250 in the first round. So I didn't pick up any ATP points. I then went to India, and I qualified and won the first tournament in singles, and won the doubles. And I made a couple more semi-finals. So I let's say that took me to 700 singles. I then went to the grass courts. It was the ones after Wimbledon at the time, Manchester, Bristol, those type of events. And I think we won Manchester and beat like Qureshi Bapana in the semis, and beat like, Hilton Marriott, beat, like people that had gone on and won Grand Slams. And then we lost 7-6 in the third to Benetton, who in the final at Bristol had match point, and again beat like David Prinisol. Had like these amazing results. So my doubles results were very good straight away. But the one thing that I think all of us had in that era was strong ceilings put in place.
Definitely.
You know, and for me, I think that's a little bit. Wimbledon's a little bit part of that,
I
being
agree with that.
British, you
Yeah.
know, and it was like I knew in my head I had to be top 150, then I got a Wimbledon wildcard. So I was top 150. And then I got my wildcard. And then the next year, top 150, I got my wildcard. And it
Yes.
was like, and in the first year, I was just happy getting my wildcard, I think. I obviously tried to win, but had some set points, but didn't. I played twice, senior Wimbledon. Second year, oh, well, I should probably win a round, seeing as I lost first round last year. That would be an advance. Won my first round. I mean, we lost to the Bryans in the second round in a tight 4-set match, so it's not like I'm exactly. But I reached the things that I put the ceiling in place that I would reach, but I think those ceilings were put in place way too much.
Do you think you had too much respect for people that were perhaps on paper better than you?
Yeah, way too much,
Yeah.
and that actually, I mean, it actually jumped into when you were telling your story there, Candy, of like you just felt you had that feeling of like, well, I'm not going to be a tennis player. I think it's fascinating for me now that I'm working in the top end of the game, because I'm like, if only I knew
Right.
that these guys are all completely losing their marbles and are all completely all over the place. If only I knew that.
I know. I feel the same. I feel the same as a commentator because you can see the strengths and weaknesses. Now I know a lot of the players inside out and the struggles that they've been through, and just the fact that they ground it out and kept going
Yeah.
is the main thing. And so the kids that I'm working with, I just keep talking about long term. Get your technique, make sure you're fit, make sure you're strong, but don't worry, don't get caught up in silly results because it means absolutely nothing in your long term
Yeah.
plan.
But I think losing, I don't know, you talked about this earlier, you said up until you were 12. I Losing for me is what kills most tennis players. The losing's when it's too painful, it's too much, it brings too many demons, it brings too many doubts, it's too hard, it's too heavy. It's like that. It just is. It becomes too much. Even in Serena's last 18 months, you could see it. The losing was too much. She wanted so badly to win number 24 and win one
Yeah,
as a
agreed.
mom, and she wanted it so badly that the losing, and then it leads into everything, and it goes. So when you played, were you as you got a bit older, and I guess this question's probably before CNM became your focus, were you able to handle the losing? And then my second part of the question is when you then
No.
went to when you went to college and you had a different outlook because there was
Yes.
a slightly different focus, did that shift and then maybe help you play better tennis?
Well, no, I was never a good loser. I was a terrible loser, in fact. And I think you have to be a pretty bad loser. I don't think there's anybody, and I certainly didn't get anywhere near the top of the game, but if you talk to the top players, losing was just not part of the equation. It's just a horrible thing. But you hear it nowadays, don't you? A lot of players, even the
I think
youngsters.
Alcaraz though,
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, he's
he's
an
got
amazing
such an
loser.
amazing perspective
Yeah,
and
he really does.
outlook.
Yeah, but I
Where
think,
did this
he's
come
surrounded
from?
by people that really know what they're doing. And I think his family is amazing. Had a nice sort of chat with his dad in Beijing. He's obviously got one, Carlos Ferrero, who's been there and done it and understands. I just think Carlos Alcaraz is a superb human being because you're right, he can take the losses. But then you saw him at the Olympics when he lost the final to Novak. I was there. I mean, it was devastating. He was crying. He just felt terrible. And Novak was on
Was
the
it?
ground. He was also crying, but out of happiness and shaking. I mean, the stuff that tennis and sports does to everybody, no matter what level, even if you're coaching, someone who's playing in the club league, how nervous they get serving it out or the beginning of the match or trying to finish it off. It's awful. But it does make you stronger. It makes you better, I think, in life. It makes you a lot more resilient. And I suppose your second part of the question, when I didn't really plan to play tennis anymore, I suppose it was better to lose. It felt better to lose, but maybe it also took the edge off, and perhaps I could have been a bit of a better college player
Yeah.
because it wasn't the be end and end all of my life. Maybe I could have been better. So, yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, isn't it? Because you never really know.
It's about, I always, the sweet spot is giving a shit but not giving a shit. Like, it's
I
like,
think that's right. Because
and
when
it's,
I've played more senior matches, now having coached and sort of watched it on the commentary side, I've got a much better attitude. I mean, I've still got massive demons in my head. Tell me a tennis player who doesn't. But I'm able to quieten them down a lot, and I have better. I'm better able to do it. I found solutions to that, which I didn't know about when I
yeah.
was under 16, under 14, under 12. And I was actually working with a psychologist briefly, but nothing kind of stuck, I remember. I just kind of was very hard on myself and whiny and sort of pathetic when I was a junior.
Do you know what? Got a funny story. We did it. We had a charity evening this evening at the academy. We were raising money for a local charity, and we played a game called 105, which I've never played before. But it's basically a really fun game. But you're a team of four, and you're playing. If you hit clean winners, clean overheads, 20 points, volley 10, and if it's just a normal point is 1, unless it's a clean winner. And oh my God, the excuses that were coming in my head. Like, I was like, oh, I was blaming, in my head, I was blaming the feeds. I was blaming the scorers. They were getting the score wrong. Like, I was validating my
Yeah.
poor tennis in quite a disgusting way, actually.
Yeah.
I was a little bit horrified at myself because there I am, the director of the academy, and I preach these values and control the controllables, and I can feel myself like not fully blowing up, but it wasn't good what was in my
Yeah.
head. Charity evening, like a charity.
Yeah.
Like, what am I like? And it's amazing how the
Mm.
mind works, and it's actually really important. It made me realize tonight, actually, just competing a little bit helps us be a coach, just to give us that
Oh, I
perspective.
totally agree with you. I think as a coach, you've got to be playing because you forget the nerves.
You
You
do.
forget, that awful feeling 5, 10 minutes before you walk on court. How awful. I don't know about you, but I mean, that's the worst part for me is all the kind of anticipation and the worry that you're not going to be able to hit the ball in and all that stuff. And then, of course, the big points, and then just you stop feeling your backhand slightly and you can only chip the ball, and just these mad thoughts. I mean, it just brings out the crazy in
And it
people,
all happens fast.
and it all happens so fast. And actually, you've got to remember that your opponent is feeling exactly the same way as you are. Everything. And so I actually use the word stop now when I'm playing points or I'm playing matches, which unfortunately I don't do as much as I did. But up until about 6 years ago, when I was still living in America, I was playing still with college level players. I actually had a UTR of 10.6. I was playing quite competitively. I know I was playing well. We actually played a mixed doubles US Open qualifier, and we got to the semi-finals, my partner and I. So we
Wow.
were playing really well, but I found a way of kind of stopping my brain, and it was the word stop. And I just wish I'd known that at 15, 16, because it helped.
It's fascinating. We could jump into the tennis bit a bit more, but I want to move you away a little bit from the tennis because I'll go back to my intro into that. There you are. Girl done good. Global news
Superstar. I
station.
know you're going to say it.
Well, yeah, but seriously, absolutely, and you should be very proud of that. It was like,
Very kidding.
but that's not it's not an easy place to get to. I would imagine being an anchor on CNN, and then I was like, another time I was somewhere else. She's bloody interviewing Tiger Woods.
I was.
She's doing this, she's doing that. So I want to get into those bits, but timeline wise, I've worked out that you graduated around about 2000
Yes.
and you started at CNN around about 2000.
Yes.
So,
I just slept with everyone I could meet. I
so
always tell people that
that's
because
the secret.
that's the secret. Well, the funny thing is, I always tell people that with sort of a grin on my face and say, just kidding, because you got to make sure that people know that. But then
We're gonna cut the podcast, not saying the kidding bit.
I can tell you there's probably plenty of people that actually have done that. I think
Yeah,
the casting couch is well and live still, but that certainly wasn't my route. I sort of had this plan, since day one. I got to the University of Tennessee. I started my own radio show. So I went into broadcast journalism and economics. I did a double major. So every Monday I had a radio show, and I had the British 2 hours, which was great. I love that. And then I went to work as an internship for a local TV station, because in America, all the cities, so I was in the city of Knoxville, they have the ABC, NBC, CBS affiliate. So I went to work with the ABC. I learned how to edit and produce, and I did a little bit of anchoring on the university set, because they had a little program set up for us, and had an amazing teacher in Dr. Sam Swan, who helped a lot. And so I got this internship. So then I started to write and started to edit, and I did a few pieces to camera. So that was good for my reel. And then in my third year, I applied for an internship at CNN, and I got one, but it was being a tour guide. So actually for the summer, I was a tour guide at CNN, which was brilliant. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, I got paid. So most interns don't get paid. But the second thing was it gave me time to go to all the different studios at CNN, because they've got different departments. They've got CNN News, they've got the sports, they've got Espanol, all kinds of things, headline news as well. So I went to speak to everyone, and I went to kind of introduce myself. And I think a little bit like you, Dan, because I know you're good at this, but I'm quite good at talking to people. I'm quite good at verbally chatting, and I can sort of bring up small talk and ask people questions. I'm very grateful to my mum for that skill, because it is a skill. And then so I just got contacts. And then the next year, which was my fourth year, I applied and I got the news internship, and I also got the sports internship. Now, this was a bit of a dilemma, because as I told you earlier, I wanted to go into news and be the next Christian Amanpour. But what happened was the news person that had agreed to give me the internship left, and I remember not signing the contract. Now, I'm due to graduate at the end of the summer, and I hadn't signed anything, and the sports people were asking me, kind of pushing me, are you going to make a decision? And so I said, okay, I'll just go with the sports, because that was a guaranteed internship. And so I went with sport, and from day one, I thought, this is where I belong. This is the most amazing thing. So I worked for this show called World Sport, which is a global half-hour show, went out twice a day, plus they did sort of 2-3 minute updates throughout the day. Sports was a massive deal at CNN, because they also had a domestic sports channel. So they had a guy called Trev Albert, who was a former NFL guy. He taught me how to throw a spiral. He was a quarterback. At Tennessee, I went to the University of Tennessee, of course, with Peyton Manning, who turned out to be a bit of a legend amongst the NFL. So I was quite familiar with football. So we also did baseball, lots of our football. My father, as I said, was cricket. So I pretty much grew up at the cricket ground. So I knew a lot about cricket. So I just slotted into CNN Sports just so easily. And it was just the best thing I've ever done.
I have to kind of ask those kind of fan questions, really, when you're speaking, because I know you've also interviewed Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, and, we're talking about some of the absolute great. Serena
too. I actually spent the day with Serena at the Home Shopping Network, which was fabulous.
Tell me more.
Well, we did that, and then the next day I got to spend the day with Victoria Azarenka and actually hit with her. We went to spend the day with her. She was training, she was in South Florida. But so the Serena thing got set up, but the brief was essentially not to talk about tennis. So Serena designs her own clothes, her own bags, etc. And then she went to the Home Shopping Network, which is a bit like QVC, where you then go and sit on the set with somebody and then you sell everything. So you can see how many pieces of your items have been sold on the television. Yep. So we went to film this whole thing. We spent hours and hours with her. Jill Schmoller, her agent, was also there. And I remember Serena had her leg in a boot and she had it all diamond encrusted. It was very, very smart, very Serena-ish. And then, of course, we sat down with her for about an hour afterwards to have this fascinating interview about everything she did off the tennis court. And yeah, so it was just a lovely day. And then I remember the next day, I spent the day with Victoria Azarenka. I had lunch with her, had our nails done, got to hit with her. It was sort of surreal, but it was just so normal. I mean, what part of my life is not great, Dan? It was brilliant.
And has there been a moment or a person that's made you feel uncomfortable?
No. I will tell you one funny story, though. You brought up Tiger Woods. So I actually interviewed him for the first time over the satellite. So I was in the studio at CNN, and I think he was on the golf course. Can't remember which tournament. But my receiver, an IFB that I was wearing in my ear to hear him, the battery went flat. So I'm interviewing Tiger Woods, not being able to hear him.
Oh, wow.
Live on a global TV show. This is awkward. And of course, they keep coming to me. So it's a little bit like you and I were talking a split screen, and then there'll be cover video. So as soon as the cover video on, I was like pointing at my ear, trying to tell people I couldn't hear, but they didn't know what I was doing. I think they just thought I'd lost the plot. So I was looking at his lips to see when he stopped talking, and then I would ask my next question. Now, fortunately, this was before the whole golf club incident and all the women, because, he could have said after one of these answers, Candy, I've got something to tell you. I've got this problem and blah, 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 blah. And I would have then, asked him about his third shot.
And how's your... Yeah, exactly.
So I just had these very generic questions. I thought I'm going to play it safe, but this was awkward, very awkward.
And a massive test of your professionalism.
I was trying not to panic.
Yeah, but that's so. Is that a skill that you could attribute to your tennis? They put those kind of I guess those moments, right? And that's one of the things that comes through in this podcast loud and clear. It's like tennis is a vehicle that's setting us up for different things, and you can always link them together. Most memorable interview.
Roger Federer. I'm just a huge fan. Just absolutely love Roger. Sorry to say it. I know everybody feels the same way, but I've never had a bad interview with him. And I think it was after the US Open. So we got to interview him in the studio at the US Open after he won. I can't remember what year this was, unfortunately. And then, so we do a few questions after. And then the next day, he came into the CNN USA New York bureau, and I met him there. And we had this just a most amazing chat. And I remember Mirka in the background. I think she wanted to go because he's been so long because they're doing the rounds. But he just gave me so much of his time. He knew my name. He didn't need to know that. That was fabulous. And then there was another one with Phil Mickelson after he won the Masters. And this was the greatest. So a friend of mine was a big golf fan, and he said the winner of the Masters chooses the menu for the next year. I didn't know that, but I now know that. And so I asked him at the end of the interview, so Phil, have you thought about the menu? And he goes, well, Candy. And he was another one brilliant at saying your name, which makes you feel 10 foot tall. Because why would they want to know your name? You're not relevant at all. But he said, Candy, I haven't really thought about it. And then he went into this unbelievable menu, and it lasted about 10 minutes. So, how the collard greens would have this kind of sauce, and then he'd have this on the side, and then we'd have this to drink. It was just mind-blowing and fabulous. And so that one really sticks out. And, of course, Federer. And then dancing with Novak. I'll bring that one up as my last one. Do you remember at the US Open when there was a fan who was kind of dancing, and then Novak at the end of his matches would start dancing?
Yeah.
So at
he
the end,
often does.
Yes,
he loves to dance,
exactly.
yeah.
I think this was 2011 because he won it. I was there. So at the end of our little in-studio interview, I said, would you mind, dancing us out? So I've danced with Novak Djokovic, and then I'd sort of toss back to the CNN studio, and then we were both doing a little jig.
Very, very good. And my more serious question, I guess, learning question, because you've spent so much time around these superstars. They're superstars, these people, aren't they? We're not talking like they're not to their sport. They're just in this kind of sphere that just the world knows them. Is there any kind of commonality that comes across in that? Like, what makes a star? Is there something you could pinpoint and say they all kind of have that? Or were they just all very different? Is there, apart from their brilliance at their sport, what else is it? What's that kind of X factor?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to ask, but what I would say is that all of them are obsessed with it in one way or another. And I think just looking at the juniors, who is that junior who's obsessed? Who's, looking at their grips, watching some tennis when they're not playing, when they're not involved? Who's turning on the TV? again, like a Holger Rune who says, if he's not playing tennis, he's thinking about it, he's watching tennis. I think those are the players. And in any sport, you hear about David Beckham doing the extra practice when he was younger at home. And I love sports autobiographies. I love to understand why people are the best, because obviously I feel like a failed athlete and I wasn't obsessed with it. I loved it in some ways and I hated it in others, but I wasn't obsessed with it. And I think that's what is the commonality between all the best in the world.
I asked that very question to Sir Andy Murray.
I heard this interview, and I actually asked him a question about that in an interview I did with him in Basel last year. So thanks, Dan.
I hope I got the credits on this in
You
somewhere.
certainly did.
You know what I mean?
Of course.
But when I asked him about it, was he obsessed? One thing that was very clear for me, he said he wasn't.
Bullshit. Excuse me.
Now, one thing I think was very clear is that was something he had worked through with a psychologist or with his team, that actually that obsession, because obsession's quite an interesting word, isn't it, right? Because I'm a believer in that as well, this obsession with people, not just in sport, but with people in general that have high achievements and success. But it's also can be an unhealthy word. And I just got the impression when I spoke to Andy that maybe the obsession had turned unhealthy, and it had gone into this place of maybe he'd lost sight of certain things. And you can sometimes see it in Andy's career, right? And that he was so desperate and so caught up and so in this whole world that I would imagine that he'd almost worked a little bit on being not as obsessed as he once was, because there's positives and negatives to all character traits. It's like if I said to you, Candy, you're amazing, you're patient. I might say on Monday, you know what the problem is, Candy? You're too patient.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say I'm a little obsessed with what I do. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it makes you good at what you do and you care about it and you're passionate. So there's a serial killer obsession. We're not talking about that. But we are talking about something that you're thinking about pretty much all the time when you're awake. And I think you have to have that to be good at something. Really good at something.
But then I guess the challenge would be, and I certainly feel this in my life at times, it's like I'm coaching one of the top doubles teams in the world. I'm running the best podcast in the world.
Definitely. Maybe second to Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach.
You'll get your plug, don't worry. I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm an academy owner. The problem with obsession is if I put an obsession in one of those places, which I do certainly at times, it's in my personality traits, I'm now failing in the other area.
Correct.
And that's the trade-off that I think is very challenging. And maybe Andy was in trouble with Kim, and it was like, maybe he was working through not being so obsessed in that one area to bring it together a little bit more in his family life, or
I think she probably knew about his love for tennis, let's call it that, before they got married and had 4 children. And I think that's just something that she and other tennis wives and tennis husbands, sometimes it's probably less on that side, sort of have to accept when you're married to a professional sports person, you're going to come second in many, many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of that, and I'm interested in this piece, is CNN, I guess, was an obsession. You'd certainly planned it. And that's, I think that's fascinating, and I think that's kind of that you were very sly and saw it coming, and you went after your prey.
I don't think I was sly. That's a bit harsh, Dan. I was driven.
You knew, you were driven. You knew what you want. You knew what you wanted, and you went and got it, right? And you set a strategic plan up ultimately to do it. Which is a great lesson to learn. But then it stopped. Why did it stop?
Well, it stopped because I had kids, and
Okay,
yeah, I felt the
that's what
same
I
as you.
thought.
It
So,
was my husband was traveling at the same time. I was traveling quite a lot, doing really unsociable hours. My children were 4 and 2, and I could have got an au pair. I could have got a nanny. A lot of the female CN anchors did, but I sort of thought, well, I've got children. I want to really have them and be there. My mum was a stay-at-home mum after she had children, and we're best friends, my mum and I, and my brothers and her have an amazing relationship. And I just wanted that for my kids. And so that was difficult. I found the last 2 years, my last contract, I found really difficult, I have to say. And I was sort of torn in two pieces and doing neither job particularly well.
yep.
So I felt something had to give. So I stopped in right at the end of 2011, and it was hard because that was a dream job. But I'd done it for 12 years, and I'd had every opportunity, and it's one of those things. But it wasn't easy. I had a tough 6 months getting over that, I would say. But then I opened up my tennis academy because I felt I wanted to work. I've always wanted to work, bring in my own money. And it was something that the children could then come with me and do. So just like you, I had, I think your academy's a lot bigger, but I had about 50 to 70 kids in mine, ranging from all ages and all abilities. And so my children came. So my son was sort of playing 5 days a week at the age of 5. And my daughter was playing, well, 1 day a week in a little sort of red group. And then she started playing 3 times a week before we left. So both of them are really decent players. They're not going to be anything special, but wherever they go in the world, they'll also always be able to play club tennis and hit a good ball. And that's what I wanted for both of them. So it kind of worked out. So I ran a tennis academy for 7 years before leaving the US and coming back to Great Britain.
Now, as you can probably tell by my eyes, running a tennis academy isn't easy either. Like
Yeah.
leaving a job like it's not. I think probably people are thinking, okay, so she left CNN to go and be stay at home, left CNN to go and run a tennis academy with 50, 60, 70 kids is no mean feat either. Are you telling me that
I'm
what
mad.
what
Yes.
what I'm doing is easy compared to working at CNN? Like, what's
No.
what's you got to
No,
tell
not
me
it
that.
wasn't easy,
That's
but the courts were 5 minutes from the house,
okay.
and I wasn't working overnights. I wasn't traveling. It was, well, Monday to Sunday. My husband probably wanted to kill me because, of course, not getting home till 9:30, 10 most nights, and then at weekends, tournaments, matches. So looking back at it, I'm surprised we're still married. It's almost 20 years. So I've got a very forgiving husband. But no, not easy at all. Strange decision, but it kind of morphed into a lot more than I was planning it to be. But I did enjoy it, and I made some really great friends. And yeah, it was a fabulous time, but very different from CNN.
And it sounds like, and this is a massive subject, but what it sounds like is the traditional roles that we get used to wrongly is that it's often the woman in the relationship, in a male and female relationship, that is the one that has to hold the fort whilst the man goes off and does their career. It's really refreshing to hear that it sounds like it's the other way around.
Yeah, no, definitely. My husband's, I think he would admit he's less ambitious, less driven than me. I think you can only have one crazy person in the relationship. Two would be too much. So he's always been sort of happy to not go for big jobs. He's always kind of just stayed in the same role a bit and let me do mania things,
Yeah.
perhaps. But yeah, it's a weird one. It's difficult to explain, isn't it? I don't know if you have a similar relationship because you're always traveling these days.
It's just, I mean, yeah, my wife's a saint. It's just, I mean, it's like not always a saint to me, but yeah, I mean, to be in that position, and I mean, Vicky's. very heavily involved in the academy as well. So when I go away, more falls on her with the academy, not just with the kids, which is a kind of a double whammy, right? She played tennis herself to a good level, so she understands the tennis world, which I think is really important, because I think to someone who doesn't know the tennis world, it's a bit mad. It's like, what? You mean this happens? Like, what? It's kind of normalized in our world.
Yeah.
But without a shadow of a doubt, you just can't do it. You can't do it without having that combination, unless someone is an absolute superstar and
Exactly.
is able to
Yeah,
play
and you
that.
hope your kids understand and see that you're doing something for the right reasons, because of course I'm bringing in the income, which pays for them to go to nice schools, and we do nice things, not overly so, but I think I have a daughter as well as you do, and for her, to see her mum working hard and traveling to lovely places and doing interesting things that perhaps her friends' mums aren't doing. I know that she feels quite proud that, I was at the Olympics this year and go off to do and talk to various people. I think she quite likes that in a way, but also she likes me being at home. I've had a few teary conversations with her. She's 15 now, and she does understand, but I think I was away for about 3 months solid over this summer, which was too much. But, the kids are getting older, so a little bit more able to cope with it.
And if we take that subject in tennis, I actually spoke to Yaz Clark last week, a couple of weeks ago, and she, I guess, had a similar story, but that she'd almost had to but she felt she had to get out of tennis coaching because of it. And I think it's quite a common story that we see, right? That it's not easy to stay in the sport. There'll be various reasons, but probably kids is the number one.
Yeah.
Is the number one reason that makes it difficult. And I know that she kind of had certain thoughts around it, and on how we kind of empower that possibility, right? That possibility to still have the roles out there that fit into what family life is. Do you have any kind of bigger picture feelings on it of how we do? And I love your story, because it's not just saying about women doing that, but it's about the sport of tennis kind of also being able to mold into what the reality of life is, to enable people to still drive forward with their careers without it just being a 24/7 manic craziness that actually doesn't really take into consideration anything else.
I love to see female coaches on the WTA tour. Of course, there aren't any on the ATP tour. Amelie Mauresmo briefly as Murray's coach, and then there was another chap, wasn't there? I can't remember his name. His mum.
Radwanska, I saw a big news story a few weeks ago, but I don't know if I ever saw any pictures come out. Radwanska with her cats, or was that just a kind of story?
I think that was a story.
Right, okay. I mean,
I
it was
haven't heard
posted
that.
it was everywhere, but when the tournament started out in China, I never actually saw. He wasn't in Beijing; he was in Tokyo, I think.
I remember briefly seeing that. I didn't follow up, but
Okay,
I'll look into that and come back to you. But on the
okay.
women's tour, so I'm doing Ningbo, commentating on Ningbo this week, 500 WTA, and Patricia Tarabini's there with Anna Kalinskaya. And then
Yes,
there's a couple of other female coaches, aren't there? In Sandra
Marta
Zanevska's.
Kostyuk, yeah.
Yeah, she's with Kostyuk, and Biliana, of course, with Katie Bolter, although she's not in Ningbo. It was Damien Rodriguez this week. And I think there's one or two more, but it's not rife. And it's impossible, because you can't travel with either a husband or kids 40 weeks a year. There's just no way. And I would actually, in the future, I would like to do a few weeks on tour with a player, but I wouldn't do that until my kids are out of the house. I don't think it's feasible, unfortunately. I mean, it's lovely to think about it. And I think if you're in your 20s as a female, you can do it if you don't want children. And then later on, after they've left the home, or if you don't plan to have children, which is absolutely fine. Lots of people are choosing that route as well. Then why not? But other than that, I just I can't see it myself, unfortunately. I wish I could say opposite, and I don't see another way, because I certainly, at that age with young children, I wouldn't have wanted to do it.
Yeah. And what about sports media? Do you think the industry's evolved with gender representation?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, Well, you tell me. I've been in the commentary business for 4 years now, and I think there are more women, but I think it's more important not just to have 50-50 or whatever it is, but the females involved have to be good. And that's what it should come down to.
Yep.
Who's good, who's the best, who can do the role rather than a gender. I think that's so important because we have lots of people banging the female drum. But if that person in question doesn't have the background, the quality, the knowledge, then they shouldn't actually be there because they're hurting women in general, because then it just looks like it's a bit gratuitous, doesn't it, to me? So as long as that person is good, then there's absolutely a place.
I think tennis gets that better than football.
Yes.
I think I think the tennis world of media, I think there's a lot of really good on both sides. But if we take, I know there's been big arguments on the football side that it felt tick boxy. And then once you're in a position where you are tick boxy, it exactly what you're saying. It hurts. It hurts.
Yes.
It hurts the side of the argument that people are trying to make. And I beat on this drum a lot, and I still think tennis has got a long way to go. But I'm also proud of tennis as a sport compared to the rest of the sporting world in the areas. But that's also very easy as a white male in the sport to say.
I think it's absolutely fair. And obviously women's tennis is the biggest female sport in the world. I don't think there's any argument at all about that. The WTA have done an incredible job to promote women, and it can get even better. We've got some rivalries starting. I think the players now are so enjoyable to watch. There's lots of different styles of games. Karolina Muchova, my personal favourite. She's got every shot in the book. I just absolutely love watching her play. But there's so many contrasts and styles. So even though, financially and maybe visually it's not quite up there with the men, it's getting there. So it's an exciting time to be part of women's tennis.
Yeah. In terms of, I could just go into so many subjects with you, Candy, but I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious of people listening to me speaking. Not so much you. I'm sure they listen to you all day, but I have a couple more things.
We're sending everyone to sleep, Dan.
A couple more things I want to jump into, and one is podcasts. We're sat here on a podcast. It's something that we do. I know you've got a podcast, and please plug away on what that is. But you also, and we'll have all of the links in the show notes as well, but you've also had a podcast previous. Is it changing the landscape of broadcasting, for you, and where does that go next? Because I guess for me, what I love about podcasts is I love context. I'm not a massive fan of kind of the headline, or I'm not a massive fan of the quote that's pulled out. I'm a much bigger fan of wanting to understand why somebody thinks the way they do, and the context of why they think what they do, and I think there's a real space there for us to get to know the players better. Like the amount of people that reached out to me, Andy Murray does very few of any podcasts, and when he did that, like the amount of people that reached out to me, that there was a side of Andy that maybe hadn't been shown because he was able to talk for an hour and 10 minutes rather than just giving an answer to one or two questions. This is your world. Is podcasting the future? Is it going other places? YouTube? Where is the broadcasting landscape taking us?
I love podcasts. I absolutely love them. I listen to them every day. I have a dog, so I walk the dog when I'm home, and I put on podcast always. It's sport. It could be business. I absolutely love business. I save and buy stocks and shares, and very interested in that world as well. Languages, all kinds of things. I think it is the future, and it's the current, isn't it? And YouTube as well. We've just pushed our podcast on YouTube, so it's not just audible but visual as well, because that seems a way to go as well. Oh gosh, but I think it's just a way of having so much knowledge in your pocket, isn't it? And I don't think many of us have time to read. Actually sit down with a book and read. I certainly don't. So the fact that I can, be driving a car and listening to someone with some interesting information. I love writing things down. So on my phone, on my computer, I've I mean, so many notes about every single tennis player in the world. And then if someone says a saying, I just love that. I write those down as well. I've got a few that are just my favourites, and I'll bring them out on if we're coaching or sometimes during matches where I'm commentating on. So I just think there's a wealth of knowledge, and it's so easy to access. I think that's the wonderful thing.
And the future for you, you know, you've had a
Taxes.
You've had a decorated career in the sport. Truly, you know, of experiencing all of the different sides. You've touched on there. You'd love to be on the tour at some point. You know, that's an area that you'd love to get back into and push forward. Is your future behind the mic, or is your future on the tennis court?
Behind the mic. I absolutely love it, Dan. I love every minute of it. Even when I'm sitting through a Sara Sorribes Tormo, Beatrice Haddad-Meyer 5-hour thriller, I'm enjoying it. I can't tell you how much I love it. I'll do anything, anytime, anywhere, if it's commentary or on-court reporting or chatting to tennis players, sort of picking their minds, asking hopefully interesting questions that don't have a boring answer to them. Just trying to find a way to get the best out of people, because we all know there's a great story behind everybody. And a lot of these players, I think one of my favourite quotes from Absolutely Fabulous is Sports Personality of the Year, contradiction in terms. I just think that's brilliant. But all these guys and women have amazing personalities, but you just got to kind of unlock it and make them feel like they can trust you, they know you, you're not trying to get to them in any way, you're not trying to produce gossip. I don't like that side of it. But everyone has a story to tell. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone's interesting, especially professional sports people. That's just a great story, how they got there. So I love it. And I hope for many years I'll be in front of the camera, behind the mic, whatever it is. But I hope I'll be doing it.
And what about the dream of the news side of broadcasting? Is that still alive?
That is dead and buried. I just think news, 90% of it is bad, 10% of it is good, and with sport, it's the opposite. And as well as watching and loving tennis, I'm a massive, massive football fan. I absolutely love football. My brother is engulfed in the world of golf. He's a golf agent, and I love golf. I play golf. I actually played in the Surrey Golf Championships the other day and got closer to the pin and got a bottle of champers from the one and only Joe Salisbury. That's another story. I actually played golf with Stuart Sink after he won the Open Championships. CNN sent me to do that. And I tell you no lie, but I'm blowing my own trumpet again, but he said I had the best golf swing he'd ever seen.
Wow.
I'm going to take that to the grave, Dan.
Absolutely. You've got to hold on to stuff like that. We don't know what the ulterior motive was, but we need to.
There's no ulterior motive. It's true.
We need to hold on. Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned, and I'm not going to mention, is the Asian swing, because I think that's important, because the friends that I've got, actually, the number of people that have said to me, I didn't even know really there was any tennis going on in China. It's been quite a hard, I think it's been quite a hard swing for people to get to. So, yourself, Eleanor Preston, and then Calvin Betton, the coach of Henry Patton. So all four of us have just been out there. Obviously the first time in 5 years that they've had events out in China. But I can't let you go without our traditional quickfire round.
Okay, I'm ready.
My first question, actually, who was your role model in tennis?
Martina Navratilova, because I was a serve and volleyer. And I'm going to put this beyond doubt, she's the greatest of all time. 59 majors. 59.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, have you done stuff with her, broadcasting world stuff?
I mean, it depends what you mean by done, but yes, I have.
We'll leave that for the imagination, but I can't get over how lovely she is, actually. Like, I've been to quite a few events, and she always comes up and speaks to the girls, and then talk and gesture probably speaks to me a little bit as well. I'm like, she's won 59 Grand Slams. Like,
she's a legend.
Like, what? She's
the best ever.
She's unbelievable. And what about the broadcasting world? Who was your role model?
Kate Adie, growing up, I think.
Yeah.
Sue Barker, I think, because she was so good, and obviously I wanted her job a lot.
And might
Yeah, I would
get it
say
one day
those
still.
two. What's that?
Might get it one day. That's my campaign. That's my campaign.
I'm
Today
gonna
at
have to kill a
Wimbledon with
few people.
Candy. Roger or Rafa?
Roger. I love Rafa, and I've interviewed Rafa most recently, but absolutely 100% Roger.
Serena or Venus?
Uh, Venus. I
Okay.
just heard her. She was on Virgin Radio with Chris Evans, and it was the best interview. So good. I was so impressed.
She's interesting, huh?
Yeah, interesting. Really interesting. And she's got a book out, so I'm just plugging Venus's book for no reason. But yeah, it just sounded like she was really on it. And I've met both of them several times, and I was drawn a little bit more to Venus.
I have to tell a quick story now. I'm fascinated by superstars. Obviously, they're superstars as well, and they think different, right? They can't even imagine their world. So we're at Indian Wells this year, and I still. Yes, I've been on tour for a couple of years now, but you get a little starstruck, and oh my God, there's Venus. Like, I didn't even know she was still playing, if I was honest. And she walks into the gym, and she's got a tennis kit on, but she's got like this like full blazer. So this blazer, it was like, what is going on anyway? And she gets on the bike, which can only be called leisurely at best,
That's how I like to cycle too.
as she's moving on the bike, and all of a sudden she just kind of drapes her hand over her shoulder, and she just kind of pulls, almost like needles the blazer down a little bit. And this woman from absolutely nowhere just sprinted, got the massage oil out, and just started massaging her arm.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. So it was obviously like this sign. This woman was obviously waiting in the gym. Venus didn't turn to her. There was nothing audible said. It was just the second that she moved the blazer, this woman came and she was there and she was massaging her arm. That went on for about 4 minutes. Venus then put the blazer back on, and then I heard over the tannoy, can Venus Williams and whoever please make the way to the match call? You're on the centre court. So this was the warm up. She went out and she won the first set 6-2 against a good player.
Yeah.
And I don't think she lasted and lost in 3 sets. But I was like, wow, I've just like really like seen a diva moment here. That's just
You don't have anyone
unfolded.
to do that, Dan?
Well, this could be. Let's see how far and wide this one goes, Candy. Now that I'm getting
Okay.
people like you on my podcast, this might send us into
The
into a new
sponsors are just going to
place.
be rolling in.
The greatest of all time, the GOAT. We talk about it. You've just said on the well, you said overall, but on the women's side, Navratilova.
Martina. But obviously Serena's up there. I love Steffi. If we're talking numbers, I don't really like the conversation.
No.
I don't know about you.
But come on, you gotta don't sit on the fence. We gotta get one.
Martina.
Men's.
Novak. I mean, the numbers don't lie, do they?
That seemed like it was painful for you saying that.
Oh, I love Novak. I think he's an absolute genius. But I just, the way that Federer plays the game is just mesmerizing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Medical timeout or not?
No.
If you could redo one part of your career, what would it be?
I would strengthen my arm at 12 so I didn't have terrible arm issues.
What's one rule change that you would have in tennis?
Ball toss. No aborted ball tosses. Maybe one a set, but that is the max.
Pat Rafter would have been 150 in the world with that rule.
And Paula Badosa would be unranked.
Is Badosa a big one, is she?
At the moment.
Is she? What does control the controllables mean to you?
Just taking control of your own process. I mean, obviously there's not a huge amount you can do about ultimate things, but I think making good choices Good choices. Let's go with that.
And who should our next guest be on Control the Controllables?
That's a good one.
Especially
Mark
when you're
Gellard. Mark Gellard is my answer.
very good.
Coach of Magdalene, the man that I run a podcast with. He is brilliant.
Mark has had the baton passed to him, so
Yes,
he will. Well, if he agrees, then he'll be
he will.
one of the next.
He will. I've got a red hot poker.
And anything you want to tell us about your podcast, anything that you want to put, because we'll put that in the show notes. Your chance to plug what the great things that you're doing. As well.
Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach is our podcast, which I run with Mark, and it's simply about what you do, Dan. We've had you on most recently. We've spoken to Craig Tyser, the ex-coach of Ash Barty, a few times, Michael Joyce, who was the coach of Maria Sharapova, and now looking after Aisling Kruger. We've had Lapo Beccarini, who's back with Holger Rune as his strength and conditioning, was with Artifice. So many interesting voices. And again, these are people I love to talk with, find out their philosophies, find out why they do what they do and why they've got to the top of the business, just like Mr. Kiernan.
Candy, it's been a pleasure, like a true pleasure. I've loved the conversation. I'm sure everyone else has as well. So thank you for giving your time up, especially this late as well. You know, people don't realize how late we've got to get to these conversations as well. So a big thank you to you.
I think we've done quite well to keep the podcast to 2 hours. I thought it was going to go at least 5 hours. It's going to be a 5-setter, that one.
This is only set number one. You know, I didn't even touch the notes that I had written down. So there we have it, another brilliant episode, and I'm bringing this outro to you from Riyadh, where I'm at the WTA finals, and I'm so pleased to be able to share this episode with Candy Reid with you, you know, and to hear all of those stories is fun, right? We always want to entertain you here at Control the Controllables. But I think there's a big piece of education in there, you know, in terms of having a vision, being able to absolutely go for it and almost manifest your future. You know, I thought it was incredible when she said that she knew she was in that, you know, small country listening to CNN in her room, and she knew that day that is what she wanted to do. So going to University of Tennessee was the way to do it, because it was a 3-hour drive from Atlanta. Then you put the hard work in, and I guess it's like anything. It's like trying to be a tennis player, right? Or whatever we are doing in this world, we have a clear vision. We know what we want to do. We put a plan in place, and then we commit to it with hard work day in, day out. And when we do that, good things happen. And they certainly happened for Candy. You know, I see her at a lot of the tournaments, as many of you hopefully have been listening to the live shows that we've had here from Riyadh, and also the Asian Swing panel that we had going through the Asian Swing, and Candy's joined us for those as well. So I've had the pleasure of her company a lot the last few weeks, and her passion for the sport, her passion for life. You know, she lives it with gratitude. She loves what she's doing, and that comes through far and wide. And I think that's a great message for us all as well. Absolutely to take into what we do. The last thing that I think is very interesting, and she spoke openly about it, is, and we don't get this so much in the tennis world, in our industry, but why not, is that they've flipped the traditional roles around in their family. You know, her husband spends more time at home with the kids, and she goes off and she's having this career. I know it's not easy. I know that from personal experience, to have time away from your family and kids. But every family's got to do what they've got to do to make things work. And I like that Candy's story is normalizing that, you know, and it's normalizing that it can be the man that is at home, and the woman that's out there working and doing her thing. And every family has their own dynamic, but I think it's important we have those stories. I say it all the time: if you can see it, you can be it. And you know, for young girls to hear of someone like Candy's story, I think it's a brilliant story to get out far and wide. So thanks for sharing as ever, Candy. and it was a great one for me to hear, and I hope for you as well. Wherever you are in the world, thanks again. Please do give your feedback, and as ever, get in touch with us. We love hearing from you. We will have all of our details in the show notes below on how you get in touch with us. We've got a couple of really exciting episodes coming up, and one in particular I think a lot of you would love is Jacob Fernley, you know, the recently top 100 ATP player who also recently came out of college tennis and has taken the ATP Tour by storm since his first victory in Nottingham at the ATP Challenger event back in June. And that is a brilliant conversation, and that'll be coming out next week, so look forward to that and many more as we get in towards the end of the tennis season. You know, we're finishing in Riyadh. We then have Turin and also Malaga, where we have the Billie Jean King Cup and the Davis Cup final. So hope to see some of you there. I'll be in Malaga supporting the Davis Cup and seeing Rafa Nadal in his last ever event for Spain, which will be incredible. And also supporting the GB girls, but not if they come against Canada, because as the coach of Gabby Dabrowski, that's who they'll play in the second round. So I'll be there with the family. Lots of people from the Academy, Sotto Tennis Academy. Come and say hello to us if you make your way to Malaga. But do get in touch. But until next time, I'm Dan Kiernan. We are Control.